Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you for joining us today's webinar. I want to turn this over to my very talented colleagues, Andrea and Quinn. Quinn, Andrea, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. So let's just first start with the agenda here. So for today's webinar, we're going to be going through document extraction or intelligent document processing, specifically for the healthcare and revenue cycle management arena, I would say. With that said, I know we have a diverse crew that's joining the call today. What I'll preface this with is, although we're focusing on this specific area, all the challenges and the processes and use cases that we're sharing, we feel are broadly applicable. So we're hoping the whole team gets value from the presentation today. As far as the agenda goes, I'll kick us off with a bit of an introduction of LandingAI and Agentic document extraction, our product here. Talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the RCM space, specifically some of the challenges and use cases that we're seeing. And then we'll spend a good amount of time on an actual demonstration that Andrea is going to handle. So we'll do a demo of the product, talk about how we can get started with our APIs, go over some of our support documentation, and also pricing and deployment and posting options. And as Adrian said, please feel free to drop your questions in as we're going along. We're happy to take them. We like to make these as interactive as possible. Now, before we jump into the content, just wanted to do some quick introductions. Maybe Andrea, I can let you introduce yourself first.
Yeah, hi everyone, Andrea Kropp. You can see a few notes about me. I've done a lot of different things. Currently, I am supporting our go-to-market organization, helping customers achieve technical success with our products. Live in the Northwest, play lots of tennis. Come find me if you're ever in the area.
Great, thank you. And I'm Quinn Killow. I'm part of the go-to-market team as well. So Andrea and I are partners in crime. We work very closely together. I've been with Landing for the last 6+ years at this point, but really my whole career has been focused on automation in some sense, and vast majority of it automation with AI. Mechanical engineer by degree, based in San Francisco, and if I'm not working on AI stuff, I'm out riding my bike or skiing. So looking forward to the winter season coming up here. So let's jump into it. First, just to introduce Landing as a company. So we were founded by Dr. Andrew Ng. Those folks in data science, AI space, or even elsewhere probably or may have seen his face somewhere at some point. But he really founded the company with the goal of enabling our customers to achieve value from AI. And at the end of the day, what we're providing is we're helping our customers to transform their documents and images into actionable intelligence. And our AI infrastructure, our products deliver accuracy, context, and reliability needed for mission critical and enterprise ready applications to be deployed. And more specifically, what we're talking about today is agentic document extraction, or we often abbreviate to ADE. So what is ADE? At the end of the day, it's an API that takes in inputs and gives you outputs. And those inputs are documents in a variety of formats, and the outputs are, Markdown or JSON or things that you're trying to extract from those documents. But the one thing I want to mention is it goes beyond just reading text on documents. We're doing much more than that. We're able to understand a lot of critical details from documents by looking at them as a visual entity, understanding visual characteristics, figures, diagrams, tables, and ultimately getting really accurate outputs to fuel whatever downstream applications are being built around this, whether it's just straight up data ingestion or building something like a RAG chatbot around your document knowledge. And the reason we were able to get really strong performance with ADE really comes from the kind of IP behind the hoods. So what we have here is DPT2, or Document Pre-trained Transformer. So this is LandingAI's proprietary model that is kind of the brains behind ADE. You can think of it as a model that understands documents by looking at them visually as a person would, and understands things much more than just the text in the document, as I mentioned earlier. So It understands tables, complex tables even. So think merged cells, understanding where things are coming from exactly, what cell in the table. It understands things like figures, think charts, diagrams, images, and is able to summarize those and provide key details that could be necessary for the information that you're trying to pull from this document. Layout detection, so it understands the flow and structure of a document like a person would as well. So it understands the reading order. It breaks down the document into its various chunks, and those chunks goes into this next piece here, which is kind of the chunk ontology. So it understands what those different components are, whether it's a table, figure, attestation, marginalia, you name it, right? And all of that information goes into really providing a very accurate parsing and extraction from the document, which really leads into kind of next slide here that I like to share is on our accuracy. So this is a benchmark around visual question and answering for documents. So think of a large data set of document images and having specific questions that you're asking to each of those example documents, and then this benchmark measures how well you're able to answer those questions. So with agentic document extraction, we were able to get a 99.15% accuracy on the DocVQA benchmark, which you can see on the leaderboard over here on the right. Puts us at the top of even above human level performance. So really proud of this figure, and the accuracy is extremely important to our customers. Every missed decimal point in a document can be extremely important. So being able to get the highest level of accuracy possible is the most important to us as well. Highly encourage folks to go check out the blog that was written around this. We can share this after the fact as well. So pivoting a little bit, now that we understand what agentic document extraction is, I wanted to talk more specifically about the healthcare and kind of RCM space as well. First hit on some of the challenges that we're seeing in this space, but again, I think these challenges are more broadly applicable as well. So first of all, slow turnarounds. There's tons of paper flying around, and there's a lot of processing backlogs and delay in doing things like prior auth claims and appeals, and ultimately impacting cash flow and patient care. Inconsistent accuracy. So whether it's a manual process or using existing legacy tools like an OCR or even LLM pipelines, they can struggle to handle things like handwritten text, checkboxes, mixed layouts, or degraded scans. The manual review burden. I think we see a lot of automation pipelines where folks are still needing to do a ton of manual review. So again, this comes back to accuracy of the extraction, and then inefficiency as well. So one of the things that we see is that with a lot of tools out there, folks are needing to fine tune or modify their automation pipelines for each individual document format or document type, even if it's the same information that they're trying to pull from these various documents. So think invoices that are coming in a bunch of different formats, but you're trying to pull the same piece of information from each of those. If you don't have a robust tool that works out of the box for these, then you might be spending a lot of time kind of tweaking your pipeline to deal with each of these use cases. And what we see is oftentimes there's maybe 80% that fall into a small number of formats, but then there's this long tail problem of a bunch of different formats that can become a big challenge for these types of use cases. So I also wanted to talk through some of the types of applications that we're seeing in the RCM space. I'll hit on this quickly, but we see a lot in the prior authorization docs space. So looking at clinical notes, referrals, forms, test results, also denial appeals and management. So looking at denial letters, payer correspondence, supporting clinical documentation, trying to extract key data from those. Patient intake forms and medical forms. We'll see some of this going forward here, I think both in my coming slides and the demo here. But I think intake forms, IDs, insurance cards, consent forms. And then we also see a lot in the claims and EOB extraction space. So insurance claims forms, EOBs are explanations of benefits, bills, et cetera. So use cases are quite varied, but again, the challenges tend to be very similar across these. I did want to hit on a couple case studies. I'll go through these quickly, give Andrea some time to actually get through the demo here. This first case study was with a large health plan who was processing thousands of member health assessments daily, so HRAs. And what they were doing is they're extracting the health data from these health risk assessments to support their care coordination, risk adjustment, and quality reporting. And we have a representative document here on the right. So the patients would essentially hand fill in these HRAs and submit them to the company. And then they had a manual process, a mailroom, where folks would have to do data entry based on these handwritten responses, which of course was very time consuming. This manual process could take up to 6 minutes per document, if not more. And the existing manual process or the OCRs that they've tried did not deliver high accuracy. So that they're not always getting the accurate results from these documents. And there were some challenges around variability as well. It wasn't just a single language, but they had these forms coming in a bunch of different various languages and formats as well. And then there's kind of this question of verification too. So how do you verify that the data that you're entering is actually accurate? So having the ability to kind of trace back the extracted data to the ground truth or the source. So using document extraction, they were able to improve their accuracy to the 95, 99% range, depending on the document type, and reduce their review time down from 6 minutes to 3 minutes, and 80% reduction in documents requiring kind of manual correction. So pretty cool results here on what is actually a fairly challenging use case when it involves a lot of humans in the loop to actually who are actually filling in these documents. This is a very simple document that I'm sharing here, but you can imagine the actual documents would be a little bit more complex, a lot more handwriting. So another case study here is around the prior authorization use case. So this is a healthcare RCM processing 100K pages daily for prior authorization. So they're doing things like extracting patient and clinical data from all these pages daily. And what they were struggling with was accuracy for the most part. So they're getting less than 60% accuracy with their existing pipelines. And that mostly stems from the complexity of the documents. There's a lot of, again, handwritten boxes or responses, checkboxes, changing layouts. And there's also things like strikethroughs and poorly scanned documents, et cetera. And key issue for them was really the scalability. They were a fast growing company and needed to build out this pipeline to support their growth, which was projected to double in the coming year. So with ADE, they were able to get from 60% to 90% accuracy on these handwritten forms. They're able to use confidence-based routing to enhance their manual review and essentially set up a pipeline that's ready to scale to their 72 million pages per year. So pretty exciting story there. And the last one here is on medical record extraction. So again, it's an Advantage plan company. They're processing 3 to 5 million records annually. And what they were really doing here is extracting clinical data from these documents and again, using this to support risk adjustment coding. So similar challenges here, some additional ones like bundled documents. So some of their documents had multiple different types of documents within one document. So being able to split and extract from those reliably was key for them. Again, variable formats, complexity, and then traceability. Again, being able to link back the extraction to the original or the ground truth. So with ADE, they're able to get 90% automation on structured documents versus 60%. They're able to use the field level grounding from ADE and confidence scores to do their kind of human in the loop review and get some pretty massive savings out of this project here. With some of those use cases shared, I think the most exciting part is actually seeing it in action. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who gets to do the fun part and demo the product here. We're going to see how we can ingest documents, parse them, extract. It won't take too much of your thunder. I'll turn it over to you, Andrea.
All right. So I am starting here on the product page. Drop this in the chat as well. So there's a great introductory video here by Dr. Ng. There's also this blue button to create an account and start for free. This will allow you to create an account in the US or the EU region and give you a couple free credits to use. Those free credits are actually quite generous, will allow you to do at least 100 pages. So you can test quite a variety of documents. So once you've created an account, you'll be in this experience. This is called our visual playground. So as Quinn showed in his slides, we are an API first service, but we've created this playground for you to be able to kind of interact with your documents, convince yourself of the accuracy and the quality, get code samples that you can then take over into your production systems. So we will do a demonstration here in the notebook, in the visual playground, and then you can see I have some code-based examples as well, and we'll also give you an orientation to the APIs. So we do have 3 APIs: parse, split, and extract. Typically, people do use them in this order. Parse is always going to come first. So let's go ahead and upload a file. And we're going to work with this one. This is going to be our main demonstration document, and then I'll show you a couple others that have been processed in advance. So why select this document? So one, it's handwritten. It has some checkboxes. It has some circles. It's easy for most people to understand, right? Oops, clicked something on my trackpad. Let's see. Oh, I reset my zoom level. There we go. All right, so this is a physical therapy intake form, and the colors that you see around the outside here are first the identification of the chunks. So there's a logo chunk in this kind of pink color, a text chunk in green. And then on the right-hand side, we're getting the markdown and the JSON response corresponding to parsing this one document. So we do keep everything in human reading order. So this is part of the underlying DPT model to say not only is this a figure, but it's the first item in the way that a human would normally read down the page. And that becomes more important as we get into kind of like multi-column layouts, right? Think newspapers. So the markdown is pulling directly from the items over here on the right-hand side. And you can immediately see that the model is capable of understanding these kind of handwritten circles and check marks. And also down here, we're able to list all of the different options. And if you look carefully at the ones that are circled, the model is getting those correct. So there's the markdown response, and then within the JSON response, we're actually getting the visual grounding for where all of this information appears on the page. So this particular text chunk is on page 0. That's, of course, Python's page 1, and at these coordinates on that page. So we'll come back to this document when we get into extract. But let's take a look at a couple others that we did in advance. So selected this one. This is a clinical trial form. It's got a couple other chunk types that we can look at. So for example, here we have the attestation type where the model will try to read the signature, but it will tell you whether the document is signed or unsigned and if the signature is legible. This one also has some other kind of data entry formats, right, which are, a little bit unusual. I think this one in particular is quite unusual in terms of a data entry format, right? But the model is really able to understand that each of these boxes correspond to, a combined height of 1.83 meters and some additional kind of input formats. So for this kind of RCM healthcare focused webinar, we really wanted to look at a lot of handwritten kind of user filled documents because everybody creates these documents in a different way. They can get very confusing very quickly. Couple other examples to show off some more chunk types. So this is a blood test report. So this might be something that you submit to your insurance company, to your doctor as part of your kind of medical record. We've got some additional chunk types here called scan code for anything that's a QR code or a barcode. And this is important because you can actually then isolate this chunk if you needed to actually like follow that barcode or that QR code. See a couple more attestations here with signatures. So this might also be a good one to comment on the table structure itself. So this table really has no horizontal lines, no vertical lines. This is the type of table that actually VLMs really struggle with. You may also see kind of the faint watermark in the back, which kind of interferes with a lot of OCR systems. So here we do have an accurate representation of that table. And not only are we getting the markdown version of the table, but if you look carefully at the HTML, I just, it's the responsive design here to go to the table. The table here prepared as HTML actually has unique identifiers for every cell in the table. So something like, let's find a particular cell, right? So here's like a 12.5, which looks like it's the hemoglobin result. So the reason this is important is it allows you to offer visual grounding in your downstream applications. And this chat feature here is really just here for convenience to demonstrate some of the capabilities of the system. So here's a question you can ask, like, what is the hemoglobin result? And it's going to tell me that it comes from this table and from this particular table cell. So this is possible because the chunk 12 itself is identified as a table in the center of the document, and then this table cell has its own identifier as well. A couple more examples. Quinn and I each separately in our own handwriting filled out this medical necessity review form. So this is all fictitious data. This was just for the purposes of filling in a more complicated form. And you can see this one, even something as simple as how do you mark the gender, right? So Quinn did kind of like this line through the bubble and I put an X in the bubble, right? And these are the types of human variations that you need to plan for in your downstream systems. Also something like this, typically gives a lot of systems fits because it's not really obvious that this is a table with 6 columns, but this is one that comes out correctly. Okay, couple more examples. I threw this one in. This is kind of the end of a document. Threw this one in to demonstrate language support. So you can have mixed languages. The model actually performs extremely well on character-based languages, languages other than English. We get a lot of international customers telling us that the language performance is some of the best that they've seen. So this is a great way to kind of click through a lot of different languages. You can tell this was also originally a scanned document, so the quality is somewhat degraded. And a couple final examples, and then we'll move on to some of these other tabs. This is just an excerpt from a clinical trial application. The reason I've included this is that it has some extremely complex figures, but it also has these rotated tables. And let me actually scroll down to this table. So if you've done any sort of optical character recognition in the past, you may know that rotated content within a page can cause major problems. And also this particular table, not only is it rotated, it has quite a few merged cells up here with the treatment cycles and then the cycles. So you may have to like contort your head here to convince yourself that the extraction here is correct. But these types of tables are particularly difficult and often contain like particularly important details, right, in this clinical trial schedule of activities. So it's important to get these types of tables right. And last example, oh, and there's a flow chart. I love our extractions on flow charts. So this is a great example of spatial encoding of information, right? Because the information is actually encoded as you follow the flow chart. So anything that's detected as a figure and then flowchart will actually have this really nice description of like all of the pathing of all of the different branches to their terminal nodes. Um, so in the code-based examples, we'll look at some field extraction. We'll also look at preparing documents for RAG. This one is selected because it does have some additional complex figures, right? So we're getting a nice description here of the diagram. This is the sneeze reflex pathway, getting nice extraction on the line charts. And of course, this is a two-column layout, so it's important to keep that human reading order, that this is chunk 25, and then we should skip up here to chunk 26. And if you're preparing documents for RAG, this is going to allow you to do much more intelligent chunking rather than reading the text top to bottom or chunking based on every so many characters or based on punctuation marks. It's also going to allow you to easily throw away any sort of margin information that you might not want, and also to surface the figures themselves, like in your downstream RAG applications. Okay, that's all I've got on parsing. Let me pause there, take a sip of coffee. Maybe we'll see if there's a few questions, and then we're going to do split extract and all of these other items that we have open.
We have a question. They would like a little bit more detail. We'll probably address this, but we can address it now, just in cursory. A little more detail on the options on-prem deployment. Either Quinn or Andrew want to take that?
Oh, yeah, actually, that person just requested a meeting afterwards. So for deployment options, everything you're seeing right now is using our multi-tenant SaaS in the cloud. It's the least expensive, it's the easiest to get started with. It does have quite a few security features, so I'll go ahead and address some of the security. If you do need more security than what the cloud offers, we do have single tenant SaaS options. We have virtual private cloud options in all of the major clouds. And yes, one of the attendees had asked about bare metal on-prem. That definitely requires a separate conversation that we can follow up with you afterwards. But while we're here, this is a public page. It's available in the footer of our website. So I'm on this page right here, security and compliance. So the cloud version, everything you're seeing here is SOC 2, GDPR, HIPAA compliant. For HIPAA, we are able to sign a BAA with you. So the combination of using zero data retention and then signing that paperwork makes everything fully HIPAA compliant. The key element there is the zero data retention. So with the zero data retention, all the data is processed in memory and is never stored by us or our subprocessors. What you're seeing in my demonstration is that I'm referring back to a document I did yesterday or a document I did a month ago. That's because ZDR is not on for that account. If this option was on, the document would be ephemeral and you would immediately need to save the result, or it is gone and you would need to process it again. So this allows you to use our system with sensitive documents. Everything is immediately discarded with this option. Adrian, any other questions?
Yes, there's a question about competition. How does ADE compare to Reducto?
You know what? I am so busy talking to people about ADE. I have not tried Reducto hands-on, so I would not be qualified to comment on that.
I'll just say quickly, I think at the end of the day, the best way to understand the comparison between these tools is just to do the testing yourself, right? That's most common what we're running into. And the best way to prove it out is to go do a head-to-head comparison. We'd be happy to help set up something like that if you're interested.
We have a lot of questions from pre-reg, but I'll let you continue. We can take those towards later in the session.
Okay, excellent. So let's do a little bit of extraction, and let me actually go to, all right, so this is the same form, just I did some of the work in advance here. So um, what is extract? Let's see, we'll do start over. So the extract API takes the output from parse. So we saw that the output of parse is the markdown and the JSON. And then if you want to extract particular fields from this document, you can then use the extract API to do that. So you're going to need to send the markdown and you're going to need to send your extraction schema. So we're going to spend just a few minutes explaining kind of how to create a schema and then reference the documentation for schemas. So there's a bunch of options here. So there's view suggested, there's write a prompt, but just for educational purposes, I usually actually just like to start from scratch. Of course, this is left over from my testing this morning, but that's okay. So let's add a new field and we'll start super simple with patient name. Right, that can be a string. The more that you fill in the description, the better of a result you're going to get. Okay, so here we've got patient name extracted, and then we also have the chunk reference. So this is referring back to the parsing result of exactly which chunk that value comes from. And again, this chunk is associated with a page and was associated with a location on the page. Okay, so let me pull up. I've got my full schema here in Visual Studio, so it'll save me a little bit of typing. So we're going to ask for the pre-existing conditions. Oh, I'm on the wrong file. That would be the problem. Okay, so this is just saving me a little bit of typing. And I need this to be an array. All right. And I'll go ahead and say list of the conditions that are circled. Okay, so now we have two items in our schema, and we can pull out just a simple text field, or here with this content which was circled, you saw in the parse response how we had the individual kind of boxes marked, but now in extract, I want to return an array that just has all of the pre-existing conditions. So that is visually correct, right? So this experience allows you to build up your schema visually, and then you can download it for use with the API. So here, if I go back to start over, typically what we see people doing is kind of working with this iteratively and then uploading a final schema. Let's see, I'll go to patient intake. So here I'm uploading a schema from my computer. So it's got quite a few additional items. And then I can run that schema and get kind of the structure that I want. So in terms of the schema itself, you can have 5 levels of nesting. So here I've got medical history, where pre-existing conditions, and that list of 4 is one item underneath medical history. So this is a good opportunity to share kind of how to get access to the documentation. So this little link down here will take you to the documentation. You'll start here on this overview page, and a couple key things to know here. There's really 3 sets of documentation, one for the playground, one for the Python library, and one for the REST APIs. The REST API will take you through to parse, split, extract, And you'll also see in here parse jobs. Parse jobs is intended for large documents, and there's almost always a question about large documents or large batches. So we can give you some advice about when to use and parse and when to use parse jobs, but typically if it's more than 50 pages, consider using parse jobs. Let's see, let's go back to the documentation. Most of the documentation for the Python library is over here on the left-hand side. So this tile will take you to GitHub, but this is not really where most of the instructions for the library are. This is actually all pretty bare bones. So most of the instructions for the Python library are over here on the left-hand side under Get Started. And then since we were just talking about extraction, I do want to point your attention to extraction schema over here. This is going to take you through kind of the basics, which is really all we're able to show in this webinar, but go through all of the different supported field types and when to use them, give you some examples of nesting, and give you some best practices about how to get the best results with your schema. Okay. So while we're doing docs, I'll say a few other words about support, and then we'll probably go look at some code. Oh, and we want to look at benchmarks. So in terms of where to get help, so Quinn and I both work with the enterprise segment. So if you are, oh, actually, okay, let's do this. So this email, like if you look down at the bottom, this is just emailing support at LandingAI. So if you are having a technical issue, definitely do that. Discord is really the right place for smaller users to get help from our developer relations team. So when you click on that Discord icon, you'll be taken to Discord and invited to this channel. And if you come to start here, there's some information here about how to get help. So there is a bot here that is trained on all of our documentation that can help answer questions. There's also a way to get human support. And of course, there are many other people in Discord. I think this community is at about 2,000 users, so it's a great place to ask questions and get information. That's probably a good segue into pricing. So Quinn and I do work with the enterprise segment. Enterprise is typically if you're spending more than about $5,000 per month with us, and that's going to come with some additional support resources. Otherwise, you can get started with pay-as-you-go. We did talk about zero data retention. That's available at this lowest subscription tier, so it does require coming in at $250 per month, and that is month to month. So all of the pricing information is public here from the pricing link on the main website. Okay, let's touch on benchmarks. Okay, I'm going to do benchmarks and then code, and then we'll see what other questions we have. So Quinn shared some of the high-level results for this benchmark. This is based on DocVQA, which was created by some researchers, a combination of UCSF and UCSD, I believe. The benchmark itself is available on Hugging Face. So we took all 5,000 rows in the validation set, and that's what we've worked with. But you can definitely explore the original documents and the original questions here on Hugging Face. And then what we've done just to provide kind of full transparency is created this interactive gallery. So this is a good place for you just to see more variety of documents. In the panels here, there are a few examples of these successes. We've also published all of the cases where ADE got the answer wrong. Some of these are incredibly difficult, right? So this one, the question is like, who is the letter from? Our response was Haig, H-A-I-G. And I believe the correct answer is Craig, C-R-A-I-G, right? But a really pretty difficult handwriting. So I think it is instructive to explore both the correct answers and the incorrect answers. And you'll really get a sense for the variety of documents, a lot of scans, a lot of handwriting, a lot of non-English, a lot of flowcharts. So we're really proud of this benchmark and encourage you to explore it. Okay, let's go to some code-based examples. Okay, so I stopped running live code during these webinars for a variety of reasons, but I think it's actually more helpful to point you to some of the published code, give you a preview of these examples, why they're worth spending some time with, and just kind of what to expect and how to use them. So we have another repo called ADE helper scripts. And within that, there are a variety of published examples. These differ from the documentation in that the documentation is kind of discrete chunks of information for specific questions versus everything here is a complete workflow. So if you're just getting started, I would encourage you to take a look at this kind of basic parse and extract. It uses invoices as the example because it's a pretty easy teaching example. So within the input folder, you can preview some of the invoices. So they're all provided here for you to work with. And then you can take a look at the notebook itself, which has a lot of additional comments on like how to use ADE. So obtain and set the API key. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to collect all of the invoices. So this also starts to become more realistic because we're processing a batch of documents, right? Like nobody's creating a pipeline to process one document. And since we created this example, we now support quite a few other file types. So all of your like Microsoft ecosystem, like the docx and the PPTX, all of that works now as well also. So there's a schema here provided. So if I click over here, um, so also a good way to learn about good schema writing. So something like invoice date raw. I'd like the invoice date as a string as found in the document, do not reformat. So this is a little bit of kind of getting into the prompt engineering of exactly how do you want the invoice date returned to you versus the second row here is, asking to reformat it into a standard format. So in this example, you can see that the more descriptive you are with the description, the more likely you'll get what you want. So even something like currency, currency code based using the alphabetic ISO codes. So most likely the schema saying just currency will be understood, but we do see people getting better results if they put the effort into those description fields. So we've got a set of invoices, we've got a schema, and then here we're going to parse first and then extract. So it goes through just doing a single invoice, right, in that two-step process, first parse, then extract. And we've got lots and lots of output, which is here if you're interested. And then we're going to parallelize that to do many documents in parallel. This is also an area that Quinn and I provide a lot of advice on in terms of how to achieve high throughput, how to make use of the rate limits. But when all is said and done, this will actually output for you 4 different tables, which are also over here in the results folder. So here are these 4 CSVs are kind of the output from this. So the first table is just saving the entire response. So this is when it was processed, this is what version of the model was used, and here's the entire response. The second table is saving things at the chunk level. So in invoice number 2, we've got a logo chunk, a text chunk, another text chunk, and so on and so forth. So this would be a more appropriate setup if you were preparing the document for RAG that you're saving at the chunk level. And then for something like invoices, we're going to be most interested in actually flattening that information. So after we apply the schema, you saw in the schema the request for the invoice date raw and then also the invoice date reformatted. So here's a preview of what that would look like. And then, of course, invoices can have multiple line items. So here it looks like invoice 1 and 2 just had a single line item, but invoice 3 has 3 line items. So here we're getting a table at the line item level with unit prices. So this is a really great example. It's well annotated, and also like all of the individual responses for parsing and extracting are in the repo. So it's a great way to understand the output. And if you are working with invoices, it's going to save you a lot of time, and you can show your boss what you did in one day by copying that. Um, okay, I'm going to touch on this other code-based example and connect it back to some of those scientific documents you saw. So this is the other main use case that we see people preparing documents for RAG. This particular example uses some documents pertaining to the common cold, but this is really intended to represent like any sort of scientific literature, which is going to have some of those. Um, I forget which one we looked at before. Was it this one? Mm, okay, it's kind of irrelevant. Oh yeah, here this is the one I was looking for. So we looked at this figure before. So it's in understanding the symptoms. Okay. So again, input folder has, 9 scientific documents, and then we can take a look at the notebook. Actually, we don't need to look at the notebook here. Let me draw attention to a couple other things. So when you prepare the documents for RAG, right, you will be interested probably in the chunk images. So let's see if we can find that particular figure. Ah, yes, perfect. Um, so one of the things you can do with the parse result is actually isolate each one of these chunks, right? And we're seeing people then be able to surface these chunks as part of their RAG application. And you can see how the chunking here is like much nicer. It's keeping the entire paragraph together. So this example will basically prepare all of the documents for RAG, and then create kind of this master CSV file, which of course doesn't render very well on GitHub, but you can download and take a look at. So this is really preparing all of the chunks for RAG, keeping track of the chunk identifier, also what comes before and what comes after. And I'm realizing this may have been a little bit too much for an introductory webinar, but I do want to promote this repo. There's a lot of great like starter code here to get you started. Okay, let me stop there and we'll see kind of either Quinn or I can go back to sharing if we've missed things, but let's see what the questions and comments are.
Absolutely. Let me take some of that because we're coming about a time. Some of the pre-reg questions. Here's one. How to extract data from PDF drawings and bill of materials bombs.
So I actually looked at a lot of the questions that came in advance, and a lot of them just asked like that say like, how do I do this? Like hopefully have been covered now. So it doesn't matter what kind of document it is, right? If it's a bill of materials, if it's an invoice, if it's a clinical trial, if it's a blood result, we have the 3 APIs, parse, split, and extract. You can work with them in the visual playground, or you can use the starter code that we just went through to work with them programmatically. But it does not matter what the starting document is. The only thing that's going to change is the schema that you might apply to it. And I actually do have some bill of materials examples. They tend to be they're often scanned. They often have like signatures and stamps on top of them. Often like the column alignment is not so good. We see a lot of people doing reconciliation use cases between like what was in the purchase order, what's in the packing slip, um, what's what's in the like system of record. So Again, don't know exactly what that person's trying to do with their bill of materials, but we see a lot of like reconciliation use cases in the transportation and logistics industries.
We have a question around it. Can you dive a little deeper into and clarify on credit usage?
Oh, yeah, that's an excellent question. Let's do that. Okay, so at the bottom of the JSON response, you will actually see this number right here, credit usage 3. That was for parsing this one page. So if you come to the documentation, um, and we go down to, um, okay, so here we go, documents, and I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so you saw in the JSON response the 3 credits for that one page. So that is the standard cost for parsing is 3 credits per page. If you are using ZDR, that's an additional credit for each page. So at the bottom of the response, you'll actually see like the total number of credits for parsing. The credits for extraction are also in the API response. And they are based on input and output characters. So there's a whole lot of detail here around kind of like exactly how the math works. What I can tell you is that it typically comes out to about 2 credits per page to extract. So if you're extracting a lot more than that, it might be 3. If you're extracting like just the patient name, it might be 1. But extract, like as a rule of thumb, it's pretty useful to plan for about 2 credits. So coming back to the pricing page, as a rule of thumb, if you're using parse only, multiply your pages by 3. If you're using parse plus extract, multiply your pages by 5. And that'll tell you roughly how many credits you're going to need.
Excellent. Now that LandingAI is in the OCR space, um, what would either you, Quinn, see as maybe the 3 top value or benefits that the ADE brings to this particular space now?
Really, I would just say accuracy. We are intentionally targeting financial services, legal, healthcare, where accuracy matters, right? I think, Quinn said, every decimal point matters. In my demonstration, every pre-existing condition matters. Getting the blood pressure extracted right matters. So we're really bringing accuracy to this space, including on scanned documents, rotated documents, documents in many languages, documents that have been crinkled, documents that have watermarks on them. So all of that real world messiness is really what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add on to that, I would say also like the enterprise readiness and the ability to scale, right? These are almost always critical applications, right? That need a reliable solution that's ready for an enterprise grade deployment, right? And that's a big focus for us as well.
And as we get ready to conclude, any closing comments, any final thoughts to our audience?
Please try it. We want you to try it. We want you to bring your real world messy documents.
And with that, we're going to conclude our webinar. We want to thank everyone for participating. Just additional housekeeping. This was a recorded session. We will send follow-ups along with useful links. Get into our playground. Look for those follow-ups tomorrow. Oh, actually, I've got one. Someone wanted to raise their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and let you talk and ask your question live. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you now.
Yeah. I think that this is a very interesting software. I was attend a September event. I think this one very interesting, but only thing is how the costing converting with OCR because Microsoft already at least 365 agency cognitive service. Probably you guys maybe be part of ecosystem, become Azure 365 agency for the documents parsing or whatever stuff. Could be you guys very great opportunity instead of converting for the cognitive vision service. You know what I mean? Because I see the really great opportunity instead of you have become one outstanding software it become the ecosystem, become all the SAP document or invoice or Salesforce content information, or like Epic or Oracle Health kind of ecosystem. So probably it will great opportunity for you guys. Okay, that's all.
No, we appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think we might actually have someone from our partners team on the webinar here today, so something for them to go take and run with. But we appreciate it.
And with that, we bring our webinar to conclusion. Andrea, Quinn, thank you for an amazing and very valuable and informative webinar session. Thank you again. Have a great day.